Dr. Blue stood in her pristine medical bay aboard Central Station, her four hands methodically arranging and rearranging her medical instruments. The stark white walls and gleaming equipment reflected her own high standards for order and cleanliness. As the most respected xenobiologist in the Stellar Medical Academy, she had examined over 3,000 different species in her three-century career. Yet today felt different. The station's halls buzzed with excitement about the arrival of the first human diplomatic vessel. Most species made first contact after achieving faster-than-light travel, but humans had done something unprecedented. They had detected and decoded the galaxy's communication networks from their home system and simply sent a message asking to join the galactic community. The medical bay's door slid open with a soft hiss. Dr. Blue's assistant, Dr. Gray, rushed in, his skin shifting through various shades of green, a clear sign of anxiety among their species. "They're here," Dr. Gray said, his voice trembling slightly. "The human vessel just docked. They look, well, you should see for yourself." He held up a tablet showing the security feed from the docking bay. Dr. Blue's inner eyelids blinked rapidly as she studied the footage. The humans moved on two legs, like many species did, but something about their movements seemed oddly efficient. They walked with a natural balance that suggested they could switch to running at any moment. Their bodies were wrapped in artificial coverings, clothes, according to the preliminary data, but their exposed faces and hands showed pink-tinted skin that seemed almost defenseless. "Interesting," Dr. Blue murmured, her scientific curiosity overwhelming any initial apprehension. Their environment suits seemed quite thin compared to standard protocols. "That's just it," Dr. Gray replied, his color shifting to a worry purple. "They're not wearing environment suits. That's their normal diplomatic attire. They're breathing our station's air directly." Dr. Blue's lower hands dropped the instruments she was holding. Impossible. The atmospheric composition. The medical bay's door slid open again. A tall human male walked in, moving with a confident stride that made Dr. Gray back up several steps. The human's face arranged itself into what their briefing documents called a smile, a showing of teeth that, surprisingly, was meant to be friendly rather than aggressive. "Good morning," the human said in perfect standard galactic, his voice carrying an odd warmth to it. "I'm Ambassador James Miller, Earth Diplomatic Corps. I believe I'm scheduled for a medical examination." Dr. Blue quickly gathered her professional composure. "Yes, Ambassador. I'm Dr. Blue, Chief Xenobiologist. This is my assistant, Dr. Gray." She gestured to her still nervous colleague. "We'll be conducting your initial health screening today." The ambassador nodded, seeming completely at ease in the alien environment. "Wonderful. I have to say, your station is impressive. Though the artificial gravity feels a bit light, about 0.8 of what we're used to on Earth." Dr. Blue's color shifted to yellow in surprise. The station's gravity was set to the galactic standard, which most species found comfortable or even slightly challenging. For a human to consider it light was concerning. "Please, take a seat here," she indicated the examination table, trying to hide her growing fascination. As the ambassador sat down, the table's sensors began displaying his vital signs, and Dr. Blue's professional calm cracked slightly. "Ambassador," she said carefully, "according to these readings, your body temperature is extremely elevated. And your heart, you appear to have only one, but it's beating at what would be a dangerous rate for most species." Miller laughed, a sound that made Dr. Gray jump slightly. "Oh, that's perfectly normal for us. Average human body temperature is about 37 degrees Celsius, and a resting heart rate of 70 beats per minute is healthy." Dr. Blue's skin rippled with patterns of disbelief. The human's body was essentially running a constant fever, powered by a rapidly beating heart that would have sent most species into cardiac arrest, and he sat there smiling about it. As she prepared her first series of scans, Dr. Blue had a growing feeling that this examination was going to challenge everything she thought she knew about biological life. She had no idea just how right she was. Dr. Blue stared at her scanning device, her four hands trembling as she input the commands for a third recalibration. The readings couldn't be right. She had examined thousands of species, but nothing like this had ever appeared on her screens before. Dr. Gray, she called to her assistant, who was organizing tissue sample containers across the room. Please verify these readings. I must be missing something. Dr. Gray hurried over, his skin shifting between shades of blue and green as he looked at the scanner's display. Ambassador Miller sat patiently on the examination table, seemingly amused by their reactions. This is unprecedented, Dr. Gray whispered, his voice barely audible. Their skeletal structure, it's constantly in a state of renewal. Look at these calcium deposits. Dr. Blue nodded, her own skin rippling with patterns of scientific excitement mixed with horror. The bone tissue is constantly breaking down and rebuilding itself. Ambassador, she turned to Miller, are you aware that your skeleton is basically repairing itself all the time? Miller shrugged, a casual human gesture that made both doctors flinch slightly. Sure, that's how we maintain bone density. It gets even faster when we exercise, or if something breaks. If something breaks. Dr. Gray's color turned pale. You mean you can continue functioning with broken bones? Well, they need to be set properly, but yeah, they heal up in a few weeks usually. Had a broken arm once from falling off my bike as a kid. No big deal. Dr. Blue quickly made notes while trying to process this information. A broken bone would be a major medical emergency for most species, requiring immediate specialized treatment. But humans just waited for it to heal. The next series of scans revealed something even more disturbing. Dr. Blue adjusted her scanner's magnification to examine the human's blood sample. Ambassador, she said, her professional tone wavering slightly, your bloodstream appears to be filled with extremely aggressive cells that are attacking anything foreign they encounter. Is this normal? Miller smiled, showing those surprisingly white teeth again. Oh, you mean white blood cells? Yeah, that's our immune system. Pretty efficient at fighting off infections and diseases. Dr. Gray moved closer to the screen, his curiosity temporarily overcoming his nervousness. These cells, they actively hunt down invaders. And you're not concerned about them attacking your own tissue. Usually they know what to target, Miller explained. Sometimes they get confused and attack the wrong things. Those are autoimmune diseases, but mostly they're pretty good at their job. Dr. Blue's lower hands were typing frantically while her upper hands adjusted the scanning equipment. And this can't be right. Your digestive system contains acid. Actual acid. Hydrochloric acid. Yeah, Miller confirmed casually. Helps break down food. Though I have to say, I'm getting pretty hungry. Is there a cafeteria nearby? Both doctors stared at him in shock. Here was a being whose stomach contained corrosive acid, whose bones could repair themselves, and whose blood was filled with aggressive hunter cells, and he was thinking about eating. One more question, Ambassador, Dr. Blue said, trying to maintain her composure. These readings show various compounds in your system that would be lethal to most known species. Are you aware you've been exposed to toxins? Miller glanced at the coffee cup he brought with him. Oh, you mean the caffeine. And probably some traces of alcohol from last night's dinner. Don't worry, those are pretty normal for humans. Caffeine helps us stay alert, actually. Most of us have it every morning. Dr. Gray had to excuse himself from the room at this point, his skin turning a sickly shade of gray. Dr. Blue couldn't blame him. The implications of what they were discovering were staggering. Humans didn't just survive exposure to certain toxins, they intentionally consumed them for their effects on their bodies. As she prepared her preliminary report, Dr. Blue realized that this was just the beginning. Something told her that the rest of the examination would reveal even more surprising aspects of human biology. She glanced at Miller, who was now scrolling through something on his communication device, seemingly unaware that he represented one of the most terrifying species she had ever encountered. After a short break to allow Dr. Gray to recover his composure, the examination continued. Dr. Blue had managed to steady her hands, though her skin still flickered with patterns of nervous excitement every time her scanners revealed new information about their human subject. Ambassador Miller had finished his coffee and was now telling them about something called energy drinks the humans consumed when they needed extra alertness. Dr. Blue's recording device captured every word, though she almost wished it wasn't. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Dr. Blue said, her voice barely a whisper. "You regularly consume multiple neurotoxins, not just for survival, but for pleasure." Miller nodded, seeming puzzled by their concern. "Sure. Coffee, tea, chocolate, energy drinks. Lots of things have caffeine in them. Some people even take pre-workout supplements with more stimulants before exercising." Dr. Gray, who had just returned to the room, immediately turned to leave again. Dr. Blue quickly stretched out one of her lower arms to stop him. They needed to document this. "And these supplements," Dr. Blue continued, her chromatophores shifting to a pale green of distress. "You take them before intentionally damaging your muscle tissue through repeated stress." "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds weird," Miller laughed. "But yeah, that's basically what exercise is. Break down the muscles, they grow back stronger. Same principle as the bone density thing we talked about earlier." Dr. Blue's upper hands moved across her datapad, adding to her growing list of human biological oddities. Their entire biology seemed to operate on a principle of controlled damage and enhanced recovery. It was simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. "Ambassador," she said, trying to keep her professional tone, "could you explain more about these various substances humans regularly consume? For medical records, of course." Miller thought for a moment. "Well, there's caffeine, like we discussed. Theobromine in chocolate. Various spices that are technically plant defense chemicals. Some people like capsaicin. That's what makes peppers hot. Oh, and alcohol, though that's more of a social thing." "Alcohol," Dr. Gray squeaked from his corner. "The cleaning solvent." "Well, ethanol specifically," Miller clarified. "In moderation, of course. Too much isn't good for you." Dr. Blue's lower hands were shaking so badly, she had to put down her scanner. "Ambassador, are you saying that humans know some of these substances are harmful, yet continue to consume them anyway?" "Sure," Miller shrugged. "Life's about balance, right? A little coffee in the morning, maybe some wine with dinner, some spicy food now and then. It's all part of enjoying life. Though I have to say, I'm impressed by your sugar-free station. Most humans have quite a sweet tooth." The doctors exchanged alarmed glances. They had selected the station's most toxic-free environment for this first contact, and the human was calling it sugar-free, as if that was somehow disappointing. Dr. Blue pulled up a new holographic display, showing a complex chart of human biochemistry. "Our analysis shows that your body has developed multiple specialized systems to process these toxins. Your liver alone is performing functions that would require several specialized organs in most species." "Yeah, the human liver is pretty amazing," Miller agreed. "Though we try not to push it too hard. Most of the time, anyway," he added with a small laugh. Dr. Gray finally found his voice again. "Most of the time. Well, you know how it is," Miller said casually. "Sometimes there are celebrations, holidays, college years." Dr. Blue quickly decided to move the examination forward before Dr. Gray fainted. She had already filled several data storage units with information about human biology, and they hadn't even gotten to the physical endurance tests yet. As she prepared the next set of scanners, she couldn't help but wonder. If this was how humans treated their bodies during peaceful diplomatic missions, what were they capable of in less friendly situations? The thought sent a wave of purple, the color of deep concern, rippling across her skin. Little did she know, the most shocking revelations about human biology were yet to come. The physical fitness portion of the examination began with what Dr. Blue had assumed would be a simple endurance test. She had seen thousands of species perform similar exercises, but none had prepared her for what she was about to witness. Ambassador Miller changed into what he called workout clothes, simple garments that seemed designed for movement. Dr. Blue noticed that even these clothes had special properties to absorb moisture, though she didn't yet understand why this would be necessary. "We'll start with a basic cardiovascular test," Dr. Blue announced, gesturing toward the standardized testing equipment. "Please step onto the treadmill device. We'll begin at a moderate pace and—" "What speed would you like?" Miller asked, already stepping onto the machine with practiced ease. "I usually do my morning runs at about 8 miles per hour, but I can go slower if you need better readings." Dr. Gray, who had finally managed to stay in the room without changing colors every few minutes, quickly converted the human measurements to standard galactic units. His skin immediately turned pale again. That's faster than most species' sprint speed," he muttered. "Oh, that's just a jogging pace," Miller said cheerfully. "We can sprint much faster when we need to." Dr. Blue carefully adjusted the machine's settings, her lower hands hovering over the emergency stop button. As the treadmill began to move, Miller settled into an easy rhythm that seemed impossibly smooth for a bipedal species. Then something extraordinary happened. After about 10 minutes of continuous running, the doctors noticed moisture beginning to appear on the human skin. "Ambassador," Dr. Blue called out in alarm, "you appear to be leaking." Miller laughed, not even breathing heavily despite the continuous exercise. "You mean sweating? That's just how we cool down. Our bodies release water through our skin to regulate temperature. The evaporation helps us cool off." Both doctors stared in fascination and horror. The human's body was intentionally releasing precious water through its skin, and this was apparently normal. "Fascinating," Dr. Blue murmured, her scientific curiosity overcoming her disgust. "And this liquid cooling system allows you to maintain prolonged physical activity." "Exactly," Miller said, still running steadily. "It's how our ancestors used to hunt, actually. We'd just keep following our prey until they collapsed from heat exhaustion. Some cultures still practice persistence hunting." Dr. Gray had to sit down. You chased prey until it died from exhaustion." "Well, not died. Just couldn't run anymore," Miller clarified, as if that made it better. "See, most animals can run faster than humans in a sprint, but they can't cool down as efficiently as we can. So we just kept following at a steady pace. They'd run away, but we'd track them and show up again. Eventually, they'd overheat and have to stop." Dr. Blue's scanner was working overtime to record the human's vital signs. Despite the continuous exercise, his body was maintaining a steady temperature through this extraordinary evaporative cooling system. His single heart was pumping efficiently, his muscles were consuming oxygen at a remarkable rate, and yet he showed no signs of fatigue. How long can humans maintain this level of activity?" she asked, dreading the answer. "Well, trained runners can go for hours," Miller replied. "The current record for continuous running is over 200 miles, though that's pretty extreme. Most humans stick to marathons. That's about 26 miles. The room fell silent except for the steady whir of the treadmill and Miller's controlled breathing. Both doctors were trying to process the implications of what they were learning. These humans weren't just capable of short bursts of activity. They were built for relentless pursuit, able to regulate their temperature and maintain movement long after most species would have collapsed. Dr. Blue looked at her readings again. The human's body was functioning like a perfectly designed pursuit predator, and this was supposedly just a diplomat. She couldn't help but wonder what their actual warriors were capable of. "I think we have enough data for this test," she said finally, her voice slightly unsteady. "Though I must admit, Ambassador, your species continues to surprise us." Miller stepped off the treadmill, barely even-winded. "Oh, just wait until we get to the strength testing," he said with a smile. "That's where things really get interesting." After the shocking revelations about human endurance capabilities, Dr. Blue had hoped the rest of the examination would be less disturbing. Her hopes were quickly dashed during what should have been a simple reflex test. The examination room had been restocked with new equipment after Dr. Gray insisted on replacing anything the sweating human might have touched. Ambassador Miller stood patiently as Dr. Blue prepared a standard nerve response scanner. "Now, Ambassador, this is a simple test to measure your nervous system's reaction time," Dr. Blue explained, holding up a small silvery device. "We'll need to take a tiny skin sample too." Before she could finish her sentence, Miller accidentally brushed against the device's sharp edge. A small cut appeared on his arm, and a drop of red blood welled up. "Oh, I apologize," Miller said casually, reaching for a tissue. "Didn't mean to get blood on your equipment." But Dr. Blue wasn't listening. All four of her hands froze in place as she stared at the small wound. The scanner in her lower right hand was going crazy with readings. "Dr. Gray," she called out, her voice tight with scientific excitement. "Are you seeing this?" Dr. Gray hurried over, his skin shifting through shades of fascination and horror as he watched the cut. The blood had already begun to clot, and the edges of the wound were visibly starting to close. "This is impossible," Dr. Gray whispered. "The tissue is actively regenerating. In real time." Miller looked confused by their reaction. "Well, yeah, that's how cuts heal. This is just a small one. It'll be completely gone in a day or two." "A day or two," Dr. Blue repeated faintly. "Ambassador, most species would take weeks to repair even minor tissue damage. And you're saying this rapid regeneration is normal for humans?" "Pretty normal, yeah," Miller shrugged. "Though it gets more impressive with bigger injuries. When I broke my leg last year skiing, the bone took only 6 weeks to fully heal." Dr. Gray had to lean against a wall for support. 6 weeks to regenerate broken bone tissue. The doctor said it was a bit slow. "Actually," Miller added, "probably because I'm not as young as I used to be. Kids heal even faster." Dr. Blue's scanning device was working overtime, recording every aspect of the healing process. The human's blood contained specialized cells that immediately began repairs. The surrounding tissue was already generating new cells to replace the damaged ones. The entire process was like watching maintenance robots repair a ship, except this was happening naturally inside a living being. "Ambassador," she said carefully, "are there any limits to this healing ability?" "Oh, sure," Miller nodded. "We can't regrow lost limbs or anything like that. Yet anyway, there's some interesting medical research happening in that field. But most injuries will heal if they're treated properly. Cuts, breaks, burns. The body's pretty good at fixing itself." The doctors exchanged glances. The casual way the human discussed serious injuries was almost as disturbing as their healing capabilities. "And this healing," Dr. Blue continued, making rapid notes, "it works on internal injuries as well." "Generally, yes. Though internal stuff usually needs medical attention to make sure everything heals in the right place. The body will try to heal regardless, so you want to make sure it heals correctly." Dr. Blue's skin rippled with patterns of deep thought. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't just tough. They were self-repairing. Their bodies actively fought against death on a cellular level, constantly rebuilding and regenerating damaged tissue. "One more question, Ambassador," she said, studying her readings. "These repair mechanisms, do they work while you're conscious of them, or—" Miller smiled. "Oh, we heal while we sleep too. Actually, sleep is when a lot of repairs happen. The body's pretty efficient that way." Dr. Gray finally found his voice again. "You mean you just lie unconscious for hours while your body repairs itself?" "About 8 hours a night, yeah," Miller confirmed. "Though I usually only get 6 or 7. Too busy, you know." Dr. Blue added this to her growing list of terrifying human traits. These creatures spend a third of their lives in a death-like state, during which their bodies performed major repairs and maintenance, and they considered this perfectly normal. As she prepared the next set of tests, she couldn't help but wonder what other surprises human biology had in store for them. Dr. Blue sat in her private office aboard Central Station, staring at her holographic display. After 3 days of extensive testing and documentation, it was time to compile her official report for the Galactic Medical Council. Her skin shifted through various shades of professional blue as she tried to find the right words to describe what they had discovered. Dr. Gray sat nearby, still occasionally changing color when reviewing certain parts of their findings. He was organizing the massive amount of data they had collected about human biology. "How do we even begin to explain this?" Dr. Gray asked, his voice trembling slightly. "The Council will think we've lost our minds." Dr. Blue's upper hands moved across the holographic keyboard, while her lower hands sorted through various data crystals. The report began to take shape. Official medical report. Human species examination. Classification: urgent. Security level: high. Examining physician: Dr. Blue. Assistant: Dr. Gray. Subject species: human. Origin: Terra/Earth. Subject: Ambassador James Miller. Date: Standard Galactic Date. Preliminary HFY and binges. 1. Skeletal structure: continuous bone tissue regeneration. Self-repairing fractures. Density increases in response to stress. Note: their bones actively rebuild themselves stronger after damage. 2. Circulatory system: single heart, incredibly efficient. Aggressive internal defense system. Rapid clotting mechanism. Oxygen carrying capacity exceeds standard metrics. Note: their blood actively hunts and destroys foreign entities. 3. Digestive system: acid-based digestion. Multiple redundant organs, capable of processing various toxins. Note: they can digest substances that would be lethal to most species. 4. Environmental adaptations: temperature regulation through liquid excretion. Endurance hunting capabilities: sustained high energy output. Note: they pursue prey until it collapses from exhaustion. 5. Regenerative capabilities: rapid tissue repair. Accelerated bone healing. Constant cellular renewal. Note: healing continues even during unconscious repair cycle. 6. Chemical tolerances: intentional consumption of neurotoxins, regular exposure to addictive substances, high resistance to various poisons. Note: they deliberately ingest stimulants for pleasure. 3. ASC assessment: classification recommended as Death World species with extreme biological resilience. Their natural abilities exceed military-grade bioenhancements from multiple known species. Dr. Blue paused in her typing, her skin rippling with concern. "Perhaps we should tone down the threat assessment. We don't want to cause panic." Dr. Gray's color shifted to a worried purple, "but we can't ignore the implications. These humans, they're practically unkillable by normal standards. They heal from injuries that would be fatal to others. They maintain physical activity long past normal endurance limits, and they voluntarily consume substances that would kill most species." Just then, their office door chimed. Ambassador Miller stood in the doorway, looking refreshed despite having just completed a full set of strength tests that would have exhausted most beings. "Doctors," he smiled, "I brought you both some coffee from our ship. Thought you might want to try it, since you were so interested in human beverages." Both doctors stared at the cups in horror. "Oh, don't worry," Miller laughed. "It's heavily diluted. Though I have to say, your reaction to our biology has been fascinating. Wait until you meet our athletes and soldiers." Dr. Blue quickly added a final note to her report. "Urgent-addendum. Above findings represent baseline human capabilities from a diplomatic representative. Further study of their specialized populations, athletes, soldiers, etc., highly recommended. Exercise extreme caution in future interactions. Personal note: despite their terrifying biological capabilities, humans show no signs of aggressive intent. Their friendly demeanor may be the most unsettling thing about them." As she saved the report, Dr. Blue couldn't help but wonder how the Galactic Medical Council would react to these findings. One thing was certain: The arrival of humans was going to change everything they thought they knew about biological life. 1 week after submitting her report, Dr. Blue stood at the large observation window of Central Station's medical bay. She watched as 3 more human diplomatic vessels docked, bringing additional representatives from Earth. Her skin shifted through thoughtful shades of blue and green as she considered everything she had learned about these remarkable beings. Dr. Gray approached, carrying a data pad with the Galactic Medical Council's official response to their report. His color was finally stable after days of constant shifting. "They want us to lead the newly formed Human Biology Research Division," he said, still sounding amazed. "Apparently, our report caused quite a stir in the medical community." Dr. Blue nodded, her upper hands clasped behind her back, while her lower ones adjusted her medical scanner. "Did you see the responses from the Military Advisory Board? They're completely restructuring their combat training protocols based on human endurance capabilities. And the Xenobiological Sciences Academy is rewriting their textbooks," Dr. Gray added. "Everything we thought we knew about the limits of biological adaptation." He trailed off as they watched a group of human athletes exit one of the newly arrived ships. These humans were noticeably different from Ambassador Miller, their muscles more defined, their movements even more efficient. "The Sports Federation representatives," Dr. Blue explained. "Ambassador Miller said they're here to discuss interspecies athletic competitions." She paused. "The council is suggesting separate leagues for humans." Dr. Gray's skin paled slightly. "Probably wise. Did you see the records they sent us? They're Olympic achievements. The things they do for entertainment would be considered extreme survival situations for most species." Just then, Ambassador Miller entered the medical bay, carrying another cup of his ever-present coffee. His friendly smile still made Dr. Gray nervous, but Dr. Blue had grown somewhat accustomed to it. "Good morning, doctors," Miller called out cheerfully. "I hear congratulations are in order for your new research division." "Yes, thank you," Dr. Blue replied, her color shifting to a professional shade of blue. "Though I must admit, Ambassador, we're still trying to understand your species. Just when we think we've grasped the extent of human capabilities, we discover something new." Miller laughed. "Well, we're still discovering things about ourselves too. Did you know we recently found out some humans can learn to control their body temperature through mental concentration? And there's fascinating research happening in cellular regeneration." Dr. Gray's color started to shift again, but he managed to maintain his composure. "Ambassador, if I may ask, how do humans view other species, now that you've learned about our different biological capabilities?" Miller's expression grew thoughtful. "Honestly, we're fascinated. Sure, we might be stronger in some ways, but look at your species' color-changing abilities, or the Centaurians' electromagnetic sense, or the Rigelians' photosynthetic properties. The galaxy is full of amazing adaptations." Dr. Blue's skin rippled with patterns of surprise. Here was a being who could outrun most species, heal from devastating injuries, and survive conditions that would kill most life forms, and he was impressed by their ability to change colors. "Besides," Miller continued, sipping his coffee, "biological capabilities aren't everything. We're here to learn from each other, share knowledge, build relationships. That's what makes the galaxy interesting." As if to emphasize his point, a small group of human children walked past the medical bay's window, accompanied by their parents. They were pointing excitedly at the station's alien architecture, their eyes wide with wonder. Dr. Blue watched them, her scientific curiosity overtaking her initial fear. Perhaps that was the most remarkable thing about humans, not their physical capabilities, but their endless fascination with the universe around them. "Well, Ambassador," she said finally, "I believe you're right. There's still so much to learn about each other." She paused, her color shifting to a slight purple of amusement. "Though I do have one request." "What's that?" Miller asked. "Could you please warn us before you introduce us to any human extreme sports enthusiasts? I believe Dr. Gray's color-changing abilities need a break." Miller's laughter echoed through the medical bay, and even Dr. Gray managed to join in. his skin cycling through a rainbow of amused colors. Perhaps, Dr. Blue thought, this was the beginning of a fascinating new chapter in galactic medical science, assuming their medical staff could handle the stress of studying humans.